Welcome back. This is ANN News and African Stories. Rwanda says it did not shut its border at Goma because of Ebola fears, but for a technical reason. The border has been closed after a man died of Ebola in Goma, capital city of the North Kivu province, and home to 2 million persons. The DRC says the move goes against World Health Organization recommendations to keep borders open. Rwanda Health Minister Dan Gashumba says the border has now been fully reopened. She says traffic has been slow there because of increased health screening in response to confirmation of new infections in Goma. The epidemic has been declared a public health emergency of international concern. 2,600 persons have been infested and more than 1,800 killed by the year-long Ebola outbreak. The Kampala government has intensified efforts to prevent the virus from crossing into Uganda by vaccinating frontline health workers and screening every person entering the country. 2 Ebola cases have been recorded there. And still in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where the government now says a 4th person has tested positive for Ebola in Goma City. The latest case is the wife of a man who died on Wednesday. Their daughter is said to have also tested positive for Ebola, marking a rapid escalation of the disease in the city. Authorities say nearly 200 persons who had contact with the man had been tracked down and more than 150 of them vaccinated. They also said these latest statistics are not linked to the first case. Opposition medics in Sudan say at least 4 protesters were killed and many injured by gunfire in the city of Omdurman on Thursday, as hundreds of thousands took to the streets to pile pressure on the country's military rulers. Campaigners had called for a 1 million persons march in cities across Sudan in response to the killing of young protesters in El Obeid, southwest of the capital Khartoum, earlier this week. Thursday's killings, reported by the Central Committee of Sudan Doctors, one of the main protest groups, came as opposition leaders said there had been some progress in talks with the military on a deal to form a new government after Bashir's ousting. Sudan has been gripped by months of political turmoil that climaxed in the army overthrowing longtime leader Omar al-Bashir in April. Protesters have kept up their rallies since then, pressing the army to hand over to civilians, accusing the military, the security services of violence, and decrying the shortages and economic hardships that triggered the unrest in the first place. South Africa is experiencing a significant jump in its unemployment numbers. 29% of its citizens are unemployed. This is the highest level recorded since the quarterly labor force survey was introduced in 2008. Among the youth, the number is disheartening at 55%, and this was described on a recent television program as a ticking time bomb. Sumitra Indu has the story.
It came as a shock, but no real surprise. South Africa is bleeding jobs.
Some of the contributing factors to the unemployment figures that we've seen is because of the subdued economic environment that South Africa has found itself over the past 3 or so years, where we've seen a lot of companies that have been retrenching a lot of young people just to deal with cost and revenue and debt servicing challenges within their own firms.
21,000 jobs were created in the second quarter of the year, mainly in trade, manufacturing and construction. But 455,000 people were left jobless. Employment declined in the formal sector and in private households. Unemployment amongst young people entering the workforce was again the worst hit. With the rising debt, especially on ailing state-owned entities like Eskom, many are concerned that this picture is unlikely to change.
Youth unemployment being the critical challenge towards this unemployment problem, it becomes the most crucial task or the apex challenge for government. One of those, why it is so and why this is also interrelated to the question of SOEs is because at the crux of growing any economy, power is needed in order to be able to do that. So that's why the Eskom question becomes such a difficult and very complex one, and we continue to see these bailouts of this particular utility. It would be, in essence, say Eskom is too big to fail as a consequence of that, because the bedrock of our economy is dependent on that.
So youth unemployment is a key focus area of the presidency. It's at a staggeringly high rate of 56.4%. So government has proposed various reforms and initiatives in this sphere, which hopefully will create, he's looking at creating an additional 2 million jobs for youth within the next decade. An overhaul of our education system needs to take place with critical skills that are needed. New skills need to be introduced so that our youth can be competitive when, as the fourth industrial revolution becomes more prevalent.
Despite a number of initiatives and promises to create meaningful employment in South Africa, real job creation has failed. The government has been warned to address structural reforms and to loosen labour legislation, but there's been little change. With the economy expected to record just 0.6% growth this year.
You are watching ANN.